Donald Trump won this district in Tennessee by 22 points. So why are we even talking about this? How could this be competitive? Well, the reason both parties are spending millions of dollars on this race is because today's political climate and in an off-year special election can produce a very different electorate. And this is what we've seen throughout 2025, not just in the November elections in New Jersey and Virginia and New York City, but in special House elections like this one that took place in deep red territory. Democrats are significantly overperforming how Kamala Harris performed in these districts just a year ago. And that's in large part due to opposition to Donald Trump. So Democrats are hoping to ride that wave of enthusiasm and energy in these off-year, off-cycle elections in order to produce upsets. Now, if the Democrat Afton Bain were to win here, it would be a political earthquake. So this is still a very tough climb for Democrats. But even if it is within single digits, that is going to be a warning shot to Republicans as we prepare to turn the calendar to 2026 and the midterm elections, and they try to hang on to their House majority. I will also note one thing else, that if indeed the Democrat were to shock the world with a victory, that would take a potential vote away from Mike Johnson in his very narrow majority in the House. He's got 219 Republicans right now. He can only afford to lose 2 Republicans on any party line vote. He'd like one more for a little cushion, and that's what a Republican victory would deliver to the Speaker today.
David Chalian, you're the best. Thank you so much. Joining us right now, our Democratic strategist Megan Hayes and Republican strategist Doug Hyde, 2 of the best as well, not to diminish you guys, my friends. This also gives us the opportunity to play the latest round of our favorite game of big deal or no big deal. Let me set the table with this aspect when it comes to this race. Mike Johnson told reporters in Tennessee this: "We think what will happen here will be a bellwether for the midterms next year." And a month ago, he said this about Democratic wins in Virginia and New Jersey.
I don't think the loss last night was any reflection about Republicans at all. What happened last night was blue states and blue cities voted blue. We all saw that coming.
So it's not a bellwether at all. Doug, big deal or no big deal? What's going to happen in Tennessee?
I think we need to figure out what happens first, and we'll find that out, I think, pretty quickly tonight as the votes come in. As David is right, if this is in single digits, it's a big warning sign for Republicans moving to the midterm elections. Special elections do not determine what happens a year later. We do overrate this, but if it is that close, it's going to be a big deal. And one of the things when you get to election day that campaigns say to themselves, this is true Republican or Democrat, Megan knows this, is you ask yourself, did we leave everything on the field? And my fear for Republicans on this one is they didn't. They didn't leave everything on the field. And I say that not about Mike Johnson and the NRCC. They have left everything on the field. But Donald Trump should have gone on the ground. Donald Trump used to love doing political rallies. I'm surprised he didn't do it here. We saw him phone it in, but that's exactly what he did. He phoned it in. If Donald Trump had gone on the ground in Tennessee and done a big rally for this, he would have been able to claim credit if Republicans win tonight about how he brought this race home. That to me is a surprise.
Megan literally phoned it in. I mean, Doug really means it. He literally was put on speakerphone yesterday. Megan, big deal or no big deal?
So I think the big deal is actually what's happening before anybody's even cast a vote for this. I think that we're even talking about it in a Trump plus 22 district is a huge deal for Democrats. And it also just shows that the Democrats have a chance to open up the map into places that they have not been able to do in a long time. People are tired of Donald Trump's policies. They're tired of Congress bending the knee to Donald Trump. And so they are looking for a different option here, whether it's a more liberal Democrat or a more conservative Democrat. We don't know, but I think that this just gives Democrats an option to expand the map.
Democratic overperformance in special elections this year has been an average of about 18 points. But as you mentioned, this is a Trump plus 22 district. And what makes this unique is that Democrats are relying on black voters in North Nashville who make up the Democratic base in this district, rather than the types of demographics that have propelled them to closer margins or surprise victories elsewhere this year. But it's going to be close enough, I think, to give Republicans pause about pursuing maximally aggressive gerrymanders in the states that are left considering them, including Indiana and Florida.
Explain that.
Yeah, well, in Tennessee, as you alluded to, Republicans, they obliterated the Nashville district in 2021 and spread Democrats in multiple directions into really 4 different districts. And in Indiana, what Republicans are proposing, at least in the Indiana House at the moment, is to nuke the Indianapolis district held by Andre Carson in 4 different directions. And so Republicans, if they see a thin margin for Matt Van Epps in this election, that could cause Republicans in other states and Republican members of Congress to apply pressure not to make drastic changes, considering how favorable of an environment we're seeing for Democrats overall.
So, Jake, you first brought all of this to my attention, the redistricting fight, and you kept saying it was a really big deal. It was a massive story because of the risk that Republicans would be, the risky position Republicans would be putting themselves in. We started by talking about Texas. What do you make of, I mean, this race is close. I know Dave says the Republican's going to win, but a plus 22 district where there's a Democrat even in striking distance, a Democrat that we're even talking about on national news, that in itself says a lot.
Yeah, it does. If the Republicans I've spoken to in the state over the last day or two think it'll be a Republican victory between 4.5% and 6%. That lines up with what Dave is saying, which is an 18% Democratic overperform on average. So listen, that should give Republicans pause on a lot. And the problem here for Republicans is going to be they're going to brush this off as just an aberration, as a special election that has goofy turnout, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, people aren't paying attention, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's all true. I'm not discounting that. But if that can't be your only takeaway, right? You can't say that this special election is completely divorced from every other political reality in the country. That's just, it doesn't make any sense. You can't say that this has nothing to do with what Republicans are doing in Washington, nothing to do with the president, and it's only for this reason. I don't think that passes the straight face test. And Dave, who's much more of an expert on redistricting than I am. In fact, his Twitter handle or his X handle is redistrict. So I'm hesitant to talk about redistricting in his midst, but I think, to be honest with you, that, and Dave, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think that the train is running down the track so fast in a state like Florida, where DeSantis said yesterday he is going to redistrict. This has become a litmus test for a lot of Republican politicians across the country. And they will just throw caution to the wind and say, forget it. Like, we'll deal with the ramifications later. Trump wants to redistrict. We're going to redistrict. I mean, the redistricting that they're talking about in Florida is absolutely bonkers. They're talking about eliminating all but 2 Democrats in the state, eliminating basically the entire South Florida Democratic delegation, perhaps going into Tampa and eliminating Kathy Castor. I mean, this would be a drastic overhaul of the Florida map. And I will just say, it will come back to bite them at some point, because some of these districts will not be as Republican as they once were. There's going to be bad years for Republicans in the future. Republicans underperform when Trump is not on the ballot. Trump's not going to be on the ballot forever. But right now, this is just a litmus test, and Republicans are going to do, except in a state like Indiana, they are going to do what Trump wants them to do, which is to redistrict.
And what does that say, Leanne, about their confidence for their majority, the confidence for their prospects in gaining a majority in Congress?
Yeah, well, Katie, the fact that they decided to go forward with the redistricting in so many of these states, also pushed, of course, by Trump in the White House, shows that they are very nervous about their election prospects in 2026. And this was all happening, remind you, before the November elections, where Republicans completely underperformed more than what was expected by Democrats and Republicans. And so now redistricting, which seemed like a play to not only preserve their majority, but perhaps enhance their majority from the White House and the Trump administration, this might be their only hope in keeping some sort of semblance of a Republican majority in 2026. But, as Jake said, we have reported many times that it was not necessarily House Republicans who wanted to move forward with this redistricting effort. And that's because it's going to spread so many members' seats relatively thin. And in a bad election year, in a wave election year, that could really backfire on Republicans. And so while redistricting is seen as an effort to keep the majority, it actually could backfire and make it much more difficult. And you could see more Republicans actually lose their seats, Katie.
I'm just trying to look at my notes for this Facebook post for an Indiana state senator, Jake. And this is interesting because it's Republicans pushing back on this redistricting. You heard Leanne talking about that. Yeah. But the Indiana State Senator Michael Bohacek is opposing redistricting. And Indiana's been an interesting place because the lawmakers there have not wanted to do this, despite the president's push and despite the governor's push. Here's what this state senator said about it. This is a Facebook post. Many of you have asked my position on redistricting. I have been an unapologetic advocate for people with mental disabilities since the birth of my second daughter. Those of you that don't know me or my family might not know that my daughter has Down syndrome. This is not the first time our president has used these insulting and derogatory references, and his choices of words have consequences. I will be voting no on redistricting. Perhaps he can use the next 10 months to convince voters that his policies and behavior deserve a congressional majority. He was talking about the president, by the way, using the R word about Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. But that last line, perhaps he can use the next 10 months to convince voters that his policies and behavior deserve a congressional majority. That says a lot about at least one Republican who's looking at the landscape, Jake, and seeing the poll numbers and seeing the dissatisfaction. The approval rating is in the gutter, and saying, this is not on me to make it easier for you. You should take a hard look at yourself.
I was talking to somebody yesterday up here who made a really good point to me. A lot of people are seeing are becoming aware, let's say, that Donald Trump's tenure will come to an end. It's not going to be in 26 or 27. It's going to be like 2028 is not very far away. And the fact that Indiana, a state that Trump reminds people he won many times, he has sent J.D. Vance there twice to lobby people on these congressional maps. He has called in to Republican caucus meetings in the state. He has done everything he can. He had Mike Johnson talk to them. He has done everything he can to push Indiana to redraw this map. And the state Senate is just not interested, whether it's this state senator who didn't like Trump's, and rightfully so, thought the name calling of Tim Walz was inappropriate, or it's just people who are like, yeah, I don't think we should be redrawing the map to rig the election for Republicans. Like, that is what this is. And that's not like it's not, they have the power to do this, but they are doing this to get more Republican seats. Like, they are getting rid of a Democratic seat in Indianapolis, a big city that has had Democratic representation for a long time. The other seat, Frank Mervan, in the Gary area in the states, in the Chicago exurbs. I mean, these are seats that are Democratic, and they are redrawing the map to give themselves an advantage in 2026. And I can tell you, I've had Indiana Republicans say to me, like, Trump is popular. Redistricting is not. Like, people have polled this issue. Members of Congress have polled this issue, and it's just not popular. And you're seeing the waning, I think Leanne and Dave would agree, of Trump's power on an issue like this and his sway over his party.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a correct assessment. You guys can tell me if you disagree, Dave. But you were talking about Virginia and the redistricting there. You've got a whole long piece about it today. Explain what happened in Virginia and what it means for the Republican Party.
Well, at the outset of this redistricting war, Republicans thought they might be able to double or even triple their cushion in the House heading into 2026. That may still be true if Republicans get the map that Jake described through in Florida, which we'll see. But one of the blind spots Republicans had was the extent to which Democrats could convince voters to set aside constitutional amendments they had passed against gerrymandering in blue states. And we saw California do that by 28 points. It's going to net Democrats most likely 4 or 5 seats. And there's a lot of upside for Democrats in Virginia, where under the state code, they have to pass through the General Assembly 2 separate measures approving a constitutional amendment, then send it to voters most likely next April for a referendum before they can redraw the lines. They would have to push back the primary. Republicans are challenging this in court. But if Democrats, who are poised to hold a trifecta once Abigail Spanberger takes office, if they get new lines through, they could easily get rid of 3 Republican members of Congress from Virginia and possibly a 4th Republican. And that could offset what Republicans are doing elsewhere, whether it's Indiana or Florida, if Republicans are.
The collapse of the strongman illusion. Trump's political identity was built on one myth. He was the strongman who could bend outcomes, intimidate rivals, and dominate negotiations. His supporters believed it. His opponents feared it. The media amplified it. But the illusion only works as long as the world reacts with fear. Once that reaction fades, the entire myth collapses, and that is precisely what is happening. The collapse began quietly when diplomats began ignoring his threats and waiting for policy clarifications that never came. When governors publicly challenged him without consequence. When military advisors corrected him. When judges overturned his orders. A real strongman commands institutions. Trump merely argues with them. A real strongman shapes outcomes. Trump complains about them. His power was always theatrical, not structural. Foreign governments understood this sooner than Americans did. They realized that Trump's aggression is not backed by a consistent doctrine or long-term strategy. Retaliation no longer intimidates him. It confuses him. Non-cooperation doesn't provoke decisive action. It produces contradictory reactions. The world stopped playing his game when it saw the game wasn't real. And when fear disappears, strength becomes performance. The strongest proof of the illusion's collapse is internal. His own party, once enabling every impulse, now treats him like a risk to be managed rather than a leader to be followed. Advisors leak against him. Allies negotiate behind his back. Donors hedge their bets. Institutions brace for the next outburst. No one behaves this way towards a strong man. They behave this way towards a liability. The collapse is psychological as well. Trump once acted like a man, forcing the world to adapt to him. Now he acts like a man reacting to a world that refuses to adapt. The shift is subtle, but fatal. His anger feels less like dominance and more like frustration. His attacks feel less strategic and more frantic. His defiance looks less heroic and more desperate. Strongmen don't explain themselves. They impose themselves. Trump now spends more time insisting he is winning than actually winning. At its core, the strongman persona collapses when outcomes contradict the image. Tariffs fail. Threats fizzle. Negotiations crumble. Allies defect. Rivals strengthen. Every one of these failures chips away at the mythology until only the performance remains. Trump still plays the role flawlessly, the raised voice, the confidence, the defiance, but the audience is no longer impressed. They've seen the strings behind the puppet. A strongman without real control is not a leader. He's an actor, trapped in a role that reality no longer supports. The costume is still there, but the power it once represented has faded.